As the sun sets on another day of the 16th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, we'll try to give you a shortcut to many things in the world, but you'll have to wait a bit to know what that shortcut is and what it's all about. Worry not, we are still protected by Dettol, making us Swasth India, and we are delighted to introduce the nature of the shortcut. How do you remember more and forget less? And how can you earn more and become more creative just by moving houses? Is there a shortcut to learning a musical instrument? I hope there was. Writer, academic, mathematician extraordinaire Marcus du Sautoy's recent book, Thinking Better, The Art of the Shortcut, is a thought-provoking sociological and mathematical celebration of the art of the shortcut. Rooted in 2,000 years of data, Du Sautoy's guide explores how math lets us do more with less and attempts to solve the age-old question of hard work truly being the only key to success. In conversation with Jerry Pinto, he offers a shortcut explanation on how shortcuts can change the world. And hopefully, I'll also learn a bit of math in the process. Our first speaker, Marcus du Sautoy, is the Simonyi Professor for Public Understanding of Science, and with his hype man Jerry Pinto, a professor of mathematics at the University of Oxford and a fellow of the Royal Society. He's the author of 7 books and 2 plays, including his most recent book, Thinking Better, The Art of the Shortcut. I should let you know he has a bit of a sore throat, so if you can't, if that is an issue, please do bear with us. The moderator today, Jerry Pinto, is the author of 3 novels, M and the Big Whom, Murder in Mahim, and The Education of Yuri. He lives and works in Bombay and also part-time works as the hype man for Marcus du Sautoy. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the nature of the shortcut, Marcus du Sautoy in conversation with Jerry Pinto.
Hi, Marcus. I'm really happy to be here because I remember reading the title of one of your books in a bookshop. I think it was something like The Limits of What We Can Know.
It's what we cannot know.
What we cannot know. And I thought, okay, there is someone who is a professor who is admitting to ignorance, and that is a rare and different and beautiful thing. So from that time onwards, I think I've read 2 or 3 of your books. I'm very happy to be here, and especially because I started my life as a tutor of mathematics. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not even a mathematics teacher. I was called Duffer Sir, because I would take the kid who had 20 marks and help them to get to about 50 marks. And I did this largely with the help of shortcuts. I tried to teach them shortcuts, and in my heart, I felt I was shortchanging these children because I felt that I should teach them the grim and proper and methodical way that I had been taught, instead of which I was just giving them shortcuts so that they could get their marks and get through. But I felt very validated by your book, by the way, because it explained so much of what I had been doing instinctively, I think. So, you know, in India at least, there are hundreds of proverbs that say if you take the shortcut, you're going to waste more time. The shortcut has a very, very bad reputation, and we are told by stern grandmothers that if you do it right, you'll get it right, and your soul will be saved for all eternity. Did you want to restore the shortcut in some way when you started off on this work?
Yes, I think you're right, there's a stigma about the shortcut. And I think people associate it with cutting corners. So this book is not about cutting corners, because cutting corners often mean that your house is going to fall down in a couple of years. I wanted to celebrate shortcuts that get you to your destination genuinely, but in the most efficient and cost-saving time. And I understood that my own subject, the subject of mathematics, is really the art of the shortcut. And this is what my maths teacher kind of opened my eyes to when I was about 12 or 13. He said, you know, it's not about arithmetic and long division. You know, I think most people wonder what it is I do in my office all day as a research mathematician. And I think they think I'm doing long division to lots of decimal places, and that, you know, the computer would have put me out of a job by now. But actually, no, what a mathematician does is to look at a problem, and rather than doing it the long, tedious, boring way, is to try and step back and look and see, is there some clever way to think about this, that once I've solved this, in a sense, I can do all the other problems of its sort whenever I hit it. And my teacher told me this lovely story, which kind of kicks off the book, which was about the young Carl Friedrich Gauss. He's one of my mathematical heroes. I can see a few people nodding. Good. Gauss is actually a kind of companion throughout this book, actually, because he is kind of the master of the shortcut. And this already was revealed at the tender age of about 8 or 9, when in his class, the teacher asked the students, add up the numbers from 1 to 100. And I think he thought, well, this is going to take them ages and I can get a little bit of rest. And before he'd even finished asking the problem, Gauss had written down a number on his little chalkboard, put it down in front of the teacher. And the teacher thought, well, what an impudent young student, probably just wrote down some random number. But then looked and it was the right answer. He said, how did you get that so quickly? And Gauss said, well, all my fellow students are doing the hard way, the long way. They're adding up 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, probably make loads of mistakes. I noticed a shortcut, because if you pair the numbers off, 1 plus 100 is 101. 2 plus 99 is also 101. So he recognized there are 50 pairs of numbers, all adding up to 101. So the answer was 5,050. And when I saw that, I thought, this is the subject I want to do. I was a very lazy teenager. I thought, I was after easy ways to get out on the football pitch and carry on, my fun. So my teacher said, this is what mathematics is about. It's the art of the shortcut. And in a way, the book is a celebration of 2,000 years worth of coming up with shortcuts.
So you just took off your jacket and I realized that you're wearing your passion in a way. Is there like a pattern that I'm not getting in these numbers?
Well, there's a challenge for you. Is it random,
is that
or
pi
is it a
or
pattern?
something?
It's not pi, Okay. In fact, I'm still working on it. I haven't worked out a pattern. So if any of you can work out what
you are allowed now to take a photograph of Professor Sautoy. And if you look at your phone and work it out by the end of this, we'll give you a free copy of his book. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question, so I'm coming there to see you. How many of you want to ask questions of Professor Sautoy? Stand up. I can't see hands. 1, 2, 3, okay. Because I thought if we have like people who don't know, then I won't open for questions at all. But now I will, okay? Great. Thank you. Because it's a specialized field, so I thought, must not show illiteracy. Okay, or in numeracy, yes indeed, yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about, is the calculator the ultimate shortcut?
Well, there's a lot of stigma about whether you use a calculator in school. And actually, I think it's a fantastic shortcut. It's got all those shortcuts embedded into the piece of machinery. So I'm a big proponent of, yes, a lot of people say it dulls the brain. I don't think so. I think it liberates the brain to think about more interesting things. And so, I still think you need to know your multiplication tables. That's a bit like knowing your scales.
Why?
Because it just makes things fast when you are faced with a problem. You get an intuition that comes from practice. So it's interesting. I mean, I talk about the shortcuts to playing a musical instrument. Well, actually, I think your scales and arpeggios are a way of shortcutting that. So I do think there are shortcuts to an instrument, but there's also just the hard work of getting it in your body.
And so that, at one point you have a lovely, I think you have a kind of like sidebar where you talk about music and you try to find out whether there are shortcuts in music. Would you tell us about that a little?
I was quite keen to interview other people about whether they had shortcuts in their professions and whether they were similar to my mathematical shortcuts. So I interviewed a cellist I know, Robert McFarlane, who's a walker, the founder of lastminute.com, a startup company, other shortcuts to starting up companies. And the interesting thing was, and this actually relates to why my voice is so bad, because there are some things that it's very difficult to shortcut, and they're generally related to your body. So if you're trying to change your body or heal your body, that actually takes time. So I had an operation a few months ago. I thought I would be okay by now, but it is taking time to kind of heal your body. And that was also what I found with the cellist. She said, yeah, the scales and short arpeggios are a shortcut because it means, it's a bit like when you're reading, you don't read a word letter by letter, you see a word. And in music, you do the same. When you see Mozart writing a cascade of notes upwards, you say, I recognize that, that's a scale. So you can play that word immediately. And so there are shortcuts, but she said, I can't shortcut all that practice. I need to physically change my body so my fingers have a kind of muscle memory. And so I think anything where there's the body involved, very hard to shortcut. I mean, take the COVID vaccine, for example. We did pretty well to get that out in a year. But actually, we still needed to test it on people before we could release it. So, we all wanted it very quickly, but it still takes time to see the effect on the body.
So actually, the long cut takes you to the shortcut. So it's even in the reading or say even walking, yeah.
I think walking is an interesting example because you don't necessarily want to shortcut everything. Perhaps you enjoy things and you want to take the long route. So in a way, my book is saying, I want to get you to the place where you can do the things you want to do, not the things that you have to do, the boring things. So, Robert Macfarlane, I was interested, surely the shortcut for a walker is anathema. He wants to enjoy 2 days of getting to the top of a mountain. But he did tell me actually about a shortcut that he used once in a very kind of dangerous situation he found himself in. I learned this wonderful word called benighted. It means when the night comes in. We are being currently benighted. And Robert Macfarlane was at the top of a mountain and the night was coming in and it was going to be very dangerous. So he had to find a shortcut to try and get off that mountain as quickly as possible. His shortcut was creating a mini avalanche which he rode down on this snow, and he got to the bottom of the mountain before the night came in. So even somebody like Robert who enjoys the long way, sometimes needs a shortcut.
That sounds like a shortcut that could have shortcutted his life also. Really odd. But I was just thinking about this. When I used to teach quadratic equations, forgive this, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it, slip over it. When I was teaching quadratic equations, there was a formula for solving the equations. So that's minus b plus or minus b square minus 4ac upon 2a. When I taught some of my students that shortcut, they would say, this is a long cut. This is terrible. How am I going to do this? I'm like, what is minus 4ac? Square root also, I'm not doing this. Others would say, oh, quick, and get it. Is there something subjective about a shortcut? Shortcuts that work for some people but not for other people?
Well, in a way, I think that is true. We all have different ways of learning. For example, I talk about the power of a picture as a shortcut. To draw a diagram can suddenly reveal the story immediately. I actually don't think pictorially, I think very algebraically. So for me, that quadratic equation is my shortcut. I like taking the patterns in numbers into language and using that language as a shortcut to understand why that pattern always works. So I think I found that in the way that I try and communicate mathematics to the public, that sometimes music is a good way in, sometimes stories, sometimes history, sometimes technology. So everyone has a different way that they like to access this kind of the ideas. And I think, the art of being a communicator is not staying on one track. And I think this is often where a teacher makes a mistake. They get stuck in one particular way of thinking, and they don't use all the other possible entry routes into the subject, which can really open it up for a student.
I was thinking there's one of your shortcuts that you mentioned. It's a Babylonian shortcut. I want to poll the audience here. This is the shortcut. You have two very big numbers that you have to multiply. Would you use this shortcut? A into B is equal to 1/4 into curly bracket, open small bracket, plus B the whole square, minus open bracket, A minus B the whole square, close curly bracket. Would you use that as a shortcut? Where will I write it down on my fig? Okay, some people would, some people wouldn't. Okay, so I was just wondering, is there really a shortcut to making a fortune on the gaming tables?
Well, first of all, I think that's a little unfair, your formula, which is just kind of, I think, clouded people's minds. But the idea is that, sometimes, I think there's a point here, which is often to get your shortcut often requires a little bit of work initially. But once you've done that work, then it opens up a huge amount more. It's like the tunnel under a mountain. Yeah, making that tunnel is a lot of hard work. But once it's opened, there it is for everyone else to travel through. Okay, you want to make a lot of money.
There's a lovely story inside this book about Samuel Pepys writing to Isaac Newton, asking him about the role of a dice. And I think it's just the feeling of the fact that Pepys and Newton had a correspondence gave me a little thrill. But that's the literature student in me. Could you give us some examples of shortcuts that you've devised?
Well, I want to go back to trying to make you some money. Okay. In fact, I've got a question for the audience. So I go into a casino and I got $20. And my aim is to try and double that money. Okay? And I'm going to use the roulette table so I can put chips down on red. If it comes up red, I get 1 chip, put down, I get 2 back. So, which of these is the better shortcut? Should I put all $20 down in one go? Or should I do it one by one chip at a time? Which is the most probable to get me doubling my money by the end of it? So I'll take a vote, actually. So,
first row.
Yeah, how many people think, put your hands up, if you think that you should put it all down in one go?
Putting it all down in one go, hands up.
Okay?
Okay.
How many people think, actually, no, the shortcut is putting it $1 at a time? Wow, look at that.
Okay, majority
Majority,
$1 at a time. You're just careful with your money, that's what
Yes.
you are. Then I'll take $19 home.
So, it turns out that you're twice as likely to double your money if you do it in one go. So, yeah, it's quite surprising. And the reason is that when you do the maths, every time you play, you pay. Because the casino has a 0 and a double 0, and they take a little bit of money. Every dollar you spend, basically you're giving them a couple of pennies. So the more you play, the more you're paying. But I think it's still quite striking that it's double the chance. You don't have much fun. You either lose it in one go or you double it. So you're in fact paying to enjoy yourself by playing at the roulette table. But still, to double your money with just putting in one go is still, I think, quite surprising. And that's what mathematics is very good at, is revealing these surprises, these counterintuitive things. I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, I just use heuristics as a shortcut. Well, I think Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, revealed that heuristics, intuitive thinking, is a disaster. It leads us to wrong conclusions. And he proposes, this slow thinking, analytic thinking. Now, actually, that's why I called the book Thinking Better, because there's a little riff on Kahneman's book. Because, yeah, you want to do analytic thinking, but mathematics makes sure that actually it can be fast. It doesn't need to be slow. So thinking better is about thinking analytically, but using these tools to get quickly to your solution.
So could this all at one go and one at a time be also applied to relationships, like marriage versus serial monogamy?
No, there's a different number which helps with relationships. And this I talk about in the book because, one of the challenges when you're trying to find your partner for life is that you meet this wonderful person at school and you start going out with them, but then you start to get a little worried. You've got a data set of one. Maybe they're fantastic, but maybe there are better people out there. So you dump this person and you try another person. So mathematically, how many people should you try before you commit. Well, mathematics actually has the answer. So you may have heard of the number pi. Okay, some of you may have heard of our second favorite number, which is E. So it's 2.7 something. I'm not very good at remembering numbers. But this number E, if you take 1 over this number, it gives you about 0.37. And this is the percentage of the data you should look at before you commit. So, you know, if you're looking for a restaurant or a house, look at 37% of the data and then take the best thing which beats everything you've seen up to that point. 1 time out of 3, that will guarantee you getting the best you could. But let me say, at your wedding ceremony, please do not show your working out to your partner when you eventually say, I do. But
You have this lovely line in the book which I'm going to quote. Much of life is a game, but translating the game into one you know how to win can give you an amazing edge. Stop quote. Could you give us some examples of changing the game or translating the game?
well, actually, the book I've just finished writing, which will be out in October, is called Around the World in 80 Games. And it's all about strategies, my mathematical strategies for playing games, but also making games. So, and I tell you, it's a round the world tour. India is one of the most fantastic countries for games. So it's the country I enjoy writing about, visiting for its games. But yeah, what about a game that's a bit of mathematical strategy? So here's a very curious game. We have the numbers from 1 to 9, and we're going to pick in turn a number from the table, and the strategy is I have to try and find 3 numbers which add up to 15.
I was playing that against myself in the loo once.
And
Just
funny
trying to see what was the game about this, but it was fascinating afterwards.
And did
I
you
thought
win?
you could game it. No, my gosh, I was defeating myself and confusing myself, and then I was risking constipation, so I just let it go.
Well, the challenge of this game is there seem to be so many different ways to make 15 with 3 numbers. But it may give you a little hint of something else where you might have seen the numbers from 1 to 9 adding up to 15. And this is a magic square, discovered actually in China. And the magic square is a kind of like 3x3 grid, where the numbers in rows, columns, and diagonals all add up to 15. There's 5 in the middle. So when I play this game, I'm not playing that game. I'm playing another game which is very easy to play, which is tic-tac-toe, or noughts and crosses. So I'm playing noughts and crosses on this magic square, and I pick the numbers, trying to get 3 in a row. And that's so much easier game to play than trying to work out all of the arithmetic of 1 to 15. So this is a strategy which is very powerful. Change the problem into something else which you've already solved or you can do more easily. And that is a fantastic shortcut strategy for not just games, but for life.
No, so games is great. Magic squares is great. Now give us a strategy in like life, like flesh and blood life, not numerals and abstractions life.
I've talked about love life with my, that's how I found my partner. No, it isn't actually. I think that one of the first shortcuts I talk about are patterns. And I think that's something that I use a lot in my life, is to try and understand, is there a pattern in what I'm looking at? I mean, you challenged, is there a pattern here? And I think this allows us to predict the future. Because if you can spot a pattern, then you can read that pattern into the future and therefore make some predictions. And here's an interesting pattern. I mean, in the introduction it said, how can you use shortcuts to double your salary? Well, we spotted a very interesting pattern about cities. So it turns out if you have a city with 1 million population, and then you compare it with a city next door with a population of 2 million.
Sorry, but in India, any place with 1 million people is a village.
Okay, so we start with a village with 1 million and 2 million. So you'd say, okay, count the number of libraries in the 1 million village, or the number of cafes, or the number of patents, for example. And you think when you go to the 2 million, it would just double. It doesn't double. You get an extra 15%. So if there are 100 libraries in the town, million town, you get 215 in the larger city. Same with patents, so you seem to be more creative in the larger city. Now this also turns out that salaries also get a little extra 15%. So if you're living in a village with 1 million people, a very simple strategy for getting a little bit of for the same work is to go and move to the city with 2 million, and it turns out you're valued more and you're given an extra 15%. So that pattern, it doesn't matter whether the city is large and sprawling, small and tall, it seems to be a universal pattern about cities. So this is a kind of pattern, I look for those sort of patterns and try and exploit them in my life. So, I live in the biggest city there is in England, which is London. I work in Oxford, but I chose to live in London because I earn more in London.
Now you will be blamed. Tomorrow morning there will be a convoy of trucks setting out for Delhi as all the Jaipurias leave to get their 15% in Delhi, and you will be public enemy number 1 with mathematics. Okay, so I was wondering whether, when you're talking about calculus, we teach calculus at the point at which you've got
Look at this lady, you just said calculus, and she's walking out.
Yeah, she must have thought if it's going there, I'm not doing this. Calculus, the straw that broke my back.
No, that's good, yeah. An applause for calculus.
Okay, anyway. So you said that, and we teach it after, I think the first time I met calculus was after 10 years of learning mathematics in school. I met it the first time. And yet you tell us that there was a dog named Elvis who could max calculus. How does that happen?
Well, you see, calculus is sort of humans' shortcut to understanding nature's shortcuts. Because actually nature is very good at finding shortcuts. But nature somehow does it by trying lots of things out before it finds the solution. And we want to find it without doing lots of experiments. So there's a really interesting challenge. It's a little puzzle, actually. So, for example, if I'm a lifeguard and there's somebody drowning out at sea, now I can run twice as fast on the sand as I can swim. So where should I enter the water to get to the drowning swimmer as quickly as possible? I don't want to take a direct line because I'm going to take longer swimming. I obviously want to spend more time on the sand, but I don't want to go too far over. So it turns out, to solve this, you actually need calculus. Calculus is this amazing tool that Newton and Leibniz came up with for finding the most efficient solution to a lot of engineering life problems. But it turns out that a mathematician in America, he wondered, what would his dog do if he threw a stick into the water? It's in Chicago. And, will the dog find the optimal way? Because you've got to run across the sand and then swim. So he did an experiment with Elvis, the dog. And sure enough, every time he threw it in and he kept on marking where the dog entered, then did the analysis afterwards, the dog was finding the optimal way. Which, so is the dog doing calculus? So no, the dog isn't doing calculus. This is one of the things that, people say, I'm not mathematical, I don't have a maths brain. Actually, we all evolved to have a maths brain because the people who couldn't solve that problem didn't get to the food, didn't get to the stick, didn't get to the destination quickly. So actually nature has kind of, by a process of survival of the fittest, it's those that find the optimal solutions that actually survived. So we have an intuition very often for solving some of these problems. But, that's the trouble when it comes to probability. We don't have a good intuition because probability is about large numbers, large data sets. And essentially, we just really have a data set of the 100 people we know around us. So we have a very bad intuition, as was demonstrated, about probability. But there are some things that our brain is very good. You mentioned quadratic equations. I played for a football team in East London, and we were doing very badly. We were bottom of the league. I thought, maybe I can use some of my maths as a shortcut to try and help the team. So the first thing I thought was, okay, if you take a free kick and the ball launches in the air and you've got to try and get your striker to get to the right position to head that ball into the back of the net, what they're doing to find that position is solving a quadratic equation, because the trajectory is a quadratic and they're working out, well, where is it going to be at that particular height? But the team said, oh, that's rubbish, you know, I'm not sitting there doing a little quadratic equation every time I want to find it, so, you know, it'll already have landed. But actually I did try a shortcut which actually worked, which is, it was about the time that Beckham moved to Real Madrid, and everyone was kind of, so the young people won't have heard of this footballer called David Beckham. Shows how old I am. But he was given a prime number shirt, 23, to play in for Real Madrid. And when I looked at Real Madrid, all the Galacticos were playing in prime numbers. So I thought, perhaps they know something I don't. You know, there was my pattern. So I got our football team to change their kit. We now play all in prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, up to 43. I play in 17. And it transformed our season. We came second in the league. We got promoted. I know. But thank you.
Revenge of the Nerds Part 200.
But we discovered primes only last for one season because we got relegated back down again.
Still and all, it's a big game changer to move up the league. I was going to ask you about, you mentioned survival of the fittest in passing. So let's talk evolution and shortcuts. Do you think it is possible that nature, in pursuing the shortcut, also does this in terms of evolution?
Well, actually, I think evolution is, in a sense, not about the shortcut, because what DNA does is to randomly mutate. So it tries lots of different possibilities, and then the one that's good survives. But I think this is what's exciting about the human species, is that actually, you know, this is the point of science and mathematics. We say, hold on, I don't want to do that. That's a bad way. I don't want to build 1 million bridges and see which one keeps standing. No, I want to do a kind of simulation to get the right bridge. And in gene editing now, we're trying to shortcut evolution. But there are some things we think it may be impossible to shortcut. You know, one of them is, you mentioned I wrote a book about artificial intelligence. Is there a way to shortcut artificial intelligence becoming conscious? You know, the brain is a network of synapses and neurons. It's basically some sort of mathematical construct, and for some strange arrangement gives rise to consciousness. Why can't I shortcut that inside a machine? But we think that maybe that's something that you just have to wait for evolution to tease out. But yeah, so I think it's very interesting. Nature generally does use trial and error in some things. Actually, not in all. You know, I come back to myself as a teenager. The reason I love shortcuts is that I was lazy. I wanted an efficient way to get to the solution. Nature too is very lazy, and so uses shortcuts to find solutions to things. So for example, if I blow a bubble, it becomes a sphere, a perfect sphere. Why? Because the sphere is the shape with the smallest surface area and therefore the lowest amount of energy. So that's a shortcut, that sphere, to the most efficient low energy solution. And very often we can find our shortcuts by looking at nature and saying, well, what did nature do? And copying that. So that's a good shortcut.
So would there be morally improper shortcuts like, say, eugenics? Because if you're thinking about improving everybody, then you just like take, you know, X number of really Marcus du Sautoy type sperm, and then you take Shobade eggs, and then you say, okay, we will get this brilliant, you know, sort of like 70 or, I mean, someone who will be gorgeous, and not that you're not gorgeous, but I mean, you'll get everything. But would that shortcut be morally improper?
Well, I think also it wouldn't be a good shortcut, because ultimately what you need is a variety in the gene base. So I think you're right. You do have to be careful. Some shortcuts turn out to be cutting corners. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the challenges in the book, is distinguishing the shortcuts which are good, get you to the solution you want, and those which are actually bad shortcuts, cutting corners, and actually have bad consequences.
Just the last question, and then we'll open to the audience. I can feel at least 3 people waiting for their chance to get at you. Okay? So, is artificial intelligence the ultimate shortcut for all of us? Because I mean, I'm really looking at this chat GPT thing, for instance, and yesterday I was sitting with a friend, and the friend said, give me a poem on Bhel Puri. And it produced like a 3-verse poem on Bhel Puri, which is pretty accurate about Bhel Puri also. It said things about, you know, the tanginess of the spices and the crunch of X and Y and Z. So is this now like, what do you
Are
think?
you out of a job, Jerry? You've got to remember artificial intelligence is a tool at the moment to help us do new things. And I would say, yes, a very powerful shortcut for certain things. You see, I compare it a little bit like when Galileo got a telescope. That was an amazing tool to see deep into the solar system. And we discovered things that, you know, we couldn't travel there. It was a great shortcut for exploring the solar system. Well, I would say artificial intelligence is our kind of modern day telescope, not for looking into the solar system, but for looking into the digital world. We have this huge digital data, which our embodiment means it's hard for us to navigate. And we do need tools to sort of uncover patterns there. So I think that's the power of AI, is to look at patterns that we could never find. And so, you know, ChatGPT has taken the whole of everything we've written and is revealing interesting patterns there. But, you know, where the challenge is, AI currently is very bad at things which require a temporal element. So ChatGPT can throw out a short-form piece of journalism or a cryptic poem, but what it can't seem to do is to write a novel, because it kind of starts meandering. I mean, I actually reviewed a book which was written by an artist and actually GPT-3 at the time. And it's kind of it's curious to start with and quite intriguing, but in the end it doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of meanders, it's a stream of consciousness. So I think that's interesting, because AI seems to be having difficulty with things which have a long temporal scale to them. So I think poets might be out of a job. No, I don't believe that. But I think it's interesting that this kind of long form, and ChatGPT is incredible. It's learned so much on things like, I mean, my son's a coder. He's doing a lot with blockchain. He said, Dad, it's incredible. I just ask it for a bit of code, and it just writes the code for me. But it turns out it's not good at maths. So here, if you give it this problem, one person takes an hour to dig one field. How long does it take 2 people to dig 2 fields? And he goes, oh, it's easy, it's 2 hours. Because it sort of sees the pattern. So it does, it's not learned this kind of analytic, symbolic way of thinking. So I think we mathematicians are safe at the moment.
Okay, it's now time for audience questions. The gentleman in the shawl in the front. After that, there's a nice number of hands. Please make your questions short so everybody gets a shot at Professor du Sautoy. Please go ahead, sir.
Marcus, 2 questions.
One question, please.
The second one, you will really enjoy the second one.
One question.
Marcus, is it time that all mathematical proofs now are no longer shortcuts? You have brute force, like the way, say, the Fermat's last theorem has been proved. Nobody like us could ever dream of reading that. And let me slip in the second one. What about you becoming a spy? Tell us about that.
So, you're right that there are some proofs which are brute force. I wouldn't choose Fermat's last theorem. I would choose, for example, the 4-color map problem. This is the challenge of showing why any map you draw, you can always get away with 4 colors. Now, there's a beautiful proof, short proof, which shows why 5 colors will suffice. But we had to use a computer to do a brute force 4-color, to prove 4 colors. Now, I hate that proof. It's not elegant, it's not beautiful, it's long. But Fermat's last theorem, I think, is the war and peace of mathematics. Yes, it is long, it takes you on an incredible winding road, but it's unleashed so many new insights on the way that our numbers work, on the way equations work. And I think, that is a sort of shortcut in some ways, because it shows us to show that an equation has no solutions. We've got to turn it into something completely different and work there. The question is, did Fermat famously declared, I've got a shortcut, which is just a little too long to write in the margin. I don't think he had a shortcut. I think he had a shortcut, a proof for x cubed plus y cubed equals z cubed, and he thought it would extend. It didn't, and that set us on this long journey. So I think there's an interesting thing here, because often people ask me, is there a shortcut to coming up with shortcuts? And actually, I don't think there is. Very often, like the tunnel, you've got to take a long time to come up with this kind of insightful way. I spent ages at my desk trying to come up with a new way of thinking. But once it's there ready for everyone to go run through the tunnel and exploit. So I think very often coming up with a proof for the first time, as my colleague Andrew Wiles eventually did for Fermat's last theorem. But then once it's there, we mathematicians didn't take 7 years or 350 years by reading this proof. Yes, it takes a seminar of a term, but we get there now quickly. Then they are the first people who made that exploration to understand that equation. I'll leave the spy.
Okay, 10 seconds context, 10 seconds question. 10 seconds context. With my parents, I often wonder that when they fight, and I used to think they are a toxic couple, but after one point of time I realized that they play games, and it's like that maybe those games are what is keeping their relationship going. The question here is that inherent to human nature? Playing games, is that inherent to human interaction? Is that what is keeping human relationships going? Yeah.
That's very interesting, because I think one of the things I say in this new book is that artificial intelligence are getting rid of all the work. It's going to be creative. It's going to be making our novels, but eventually, what will we be left with? I think we'll be left to play games, which is. But actually, I think you're very interesting, because I think games are in some way a way of exploring each other's conscious worlds, as is art. I think art is a way of exploring our inner world, the underworld of the other. And I think the game we play with each other is like a little dance. It's a ballet, a game of chess. And you're right, sometimes if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you want to extend, you don't want to get to the finish quickly. But some games you do want to find, it's very interesting, what is a game? You sort of set up these artificial hurdles, which you then spend ages trying to find a way to get to the end. Why can't you just play chess by breaking the rules and moving the pieces to surround the king? So it's interesting that we quite enjoy this artificial rules, which we then battle to try and find some efficient way within those artificial rules to get to the solution.
Very good evening to Marcus and Jerry Pinto. 1 minute. Thank you very much for presenting such an exhilarating and energy-driven presentation on shortcut. My one question is a riddle for you and for the audience also. 2 divided by 10, the answer comes out to be 2. Now, what strategy will you apply to this? The answer is 2. Does it sound very weird? The answer is 2. I put the question to the audience as well. Thank you.
So immediately when I start thinking about this, what's your strategy when you're faced with a rather curious question like 2 divided by 10 is 2? Well, what are we talking here? So, one thing, maybe she isn't working in a base that we are, maybe 10 is 1, 0, and it's a different base. That's not the answer, because she's got 2, so 1, 0 is greater, so why is it ending up as 2? So this is actually, I think, one of the strategies that I talk about in the book is, how do you solve a puzzle like this? You need kind of strategies to ask the question in lots of different ways, try different things. What if I change the problem? Is it going to give me a way into the solution? So I think this is, she's offered us an interesting challenge. Off the cuff of my head, I'm not coming up with the right way, but I have a kind of suite of shortcuts that help me to solve puzzles like this.
My question is very short. Will the coming of AI be like the coming of industrialization? It will lead to centralization of means of production. That is a fear, right?
Well, look, I think there's a lot of comparison with the Industrial Revolution, that artificial intelligence is kind of like the new steam engine. And yes, it is going to transform society. And it's going to centralize certain things, put certain people out of jobs, but there'll be new jobs. So I think one of the things is that this revolution is happening much quicker than the Industrial Revolution. That impacted generation to generation. This revolution is happening within years, and it's happening to us individually. And one of the skills we're going to need to learn is how to learn, because we're going to need to keep on adapting and changing. And I think that's one thing our education system does very badly. Teaches us facts. Actually, the facts are irrelevant. They're all on this thing. What you need to know is how to use these things, how to learn, and how to change and adapt. And that's sort of, in a way, my Shortcuts book gives you a lot of skills for how to adapt and change to new problems, new challenges, new destinations you want to reach.
Snappy, 1.5 minutes left. Go!
So you are a great mathematician, you have written several plays, and you are an author as well. So how difficult is it to be an all-rounder and manage everything in a span of 24 hours?
They don't know about your dancing.
Yeah, you missed out my Bollywood dancing, which well, I did in one of the JLFs a little earlier, but I'm not going to do that. You know what? I actually use these as my shortcut, because if I'm thinking about a mathematical problem, very often I need to stop, take a step away, and then I go and do some theatre, or I go and do some music. And when I come back, I sort of seem to enter the problem from a new direction. And so actually for me, all of these other facets are a clever way of disrupting the world and not getting stuck in one way of thinking. So I use these pluralistic ways of thinking as a shortcut to come back to the problems that are driving me, make me get up in the morning. So in a way, doing more funnily can be a shortcut.
I'm afraid that's the end of our session for today. Really sorry. Thank you very much, Professor.
I just want to take this occasion. As you know, Marcus has had an incident with his throat. And in most cases, despite his doctor's advice, he agreed to still fly out to Jaipur to the festival and keep his commitment. So on behalf of all of us, just a big thank you, Marcus. We know how difficult it's been, but truly appreciate the fact that you've come out all the way. Everybody, I mean, truly, this is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Jerry, for that beautiful session and a great end to the third day of the Jaipur Literature Festival 2023. Marcus will be signing the books. I urge you, please don't ask him too many questions. As you can see, his throat's not doing too well, but you can meet him at the author signing stall here shortly, in basically a minute. We thank you once again, and we'd like to thank all our sponsors to end the day: ABP, Amazon, Artex, Ashoka University.
There